They looked at his hoodie and saw a trespasser. They looked at his skin and saw a criminal. But when the flight attendant sneered, "Get out of this seat, it's for VIPs only," she didn't realize the man she was talking to didn't just buy a ticket. He had bought the entire airline that morning. He sat there, silent, freezing them with a stare that cost $300 million, and waited for the perfect moment to say 2 words that would destroy their lives forever. You think you know revenge? You haven't seen anything yet. The air inside the cabin of the Gulfstream, GE-90ER, chartered under the banner of Aerovance Elite, smelled of expensive leather and conditioned oxygen. It was the smell of money, specifically old money, the kind that didn't just whisper, it silenced everyone else in the room. Marcus Thorne sat in seat 1A, a window seat that offered a panoramic view of the rainy tarmac at JFK International Airport. He didn't look like the typical clientele of Aerovance. He wasn't wearing an Armani suit or a Patek Philippe watch. He wore a charcoal grey hoodie, plain black denim, and a pair of scuffed Timberlands. His dreadlocks were tied back neatly, but to the untrained eye, or the prejudiced eye, he looked like he had wandered into the wrong section of the airport, let alone the wrong plane. He stared out at the rain, his fingers tapping a slow, rhythmic beat on the armrest. What nobody on this plane knew, not the pilots running their pre-flight checks, not the flight attendants adjusting their scarves, and certainly not the other passengers filing in, was that Marcus Thorne was currently the wealthiest man sitting on the tarmac. At 34, he was the silent titan behind Thorne Dynamics, a tech conglomerate that had quietly swallowed up competitors in AI and logistics. And as of 8:00 a.m. this morning, he was the majority shareholder of Aerovance, the parent company of this very airline. He was flying incognito. He wanted to see how his new employees treated their customers when they thought management wasn't watching. He wanted to feel the pulse of the company before he gutted the rot from the inside. "Excuse me." The voice was dripping with sugary condescension. Marcus didn't turn immediately. He kept his eyes on the rain sliding down the plexiglass. "Sir?" The voice became sharper, like glass breaking. Marcus slowly swiveled his head. Standing in the aisle was a flight attendant. Her name tag read Jessica. She had a tight, forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her posture was stiff, radiating distinct disapproval. "Yes?" Marcus asked, his voice a deep, calm baritone. "May I see your boarding pass again, please?" Jessica asked. She held out her hand, not waiting for a response, her fingers wiggling impatiently. Marcus reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the crumpled thermal paper. He handed it to her. Jessica snatched it, scanning it with a frown, as if hoping the ink would rearrange itself into an error code. "Seat 1A, she muttered, clearly disappointed. She looked up at him, her eyes flicking over his hoodie. "Are you sure you didn't find this ticket?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Find it? You think people just leave first-class international tickets lying around on the floor of JFK? "It happens," Jessica said, handing it back with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "We've had issues with unauthorized upgrades lately. Just keep your voice down, sir. We have very important guests boarding shortly, people who pay full price." The implication hung in the air like smoke. People who pay. Not like you. Marcus took the ticket back, smoothing it out on his knee. "I'll keep that in mind, Jessica." She turned on her heel and marched toward the galley, whispering something to her colleague, a tall steward named Brad. They both glanced back at Marcus and snickered. Marcus didn't react. He didn't frown. He didn't get angry. He simply reached for the complimentary water bottle, cracked the seal, and took a sip. He checked his mental ledger. Strike one. 10 minutes later, the cabin pressure shifted. It wasn't mechanical. It was social. A flurry of commotion erupted at the jet bridge entrance. 2 porters struggled with 4 oversized Louis Vuitton trunks, maneuvering them into the cabin. Behind them walked a woman who looked like she had been sculpted out of marble and resentment. Mrs. Eleanor van der Hoven. Marcus recognized the name immediately. She was the widow of a real estate tycoon, a woman famous in New York social circles for her charity galas, and infamous for her treatment of service staff. She was wearing a white fur coat that probably cost more than a mid-sized sedan, and large sunglasses, despite being indoors. She stopped in the aisle, removing her sunglasses with a dramatic sweep of her hand. Her eyes, sharp and blue, scanned the cabin until they landed on seat 1A. They landed on Marcus. Her face didn't just fall. It curdled. She turned to Jessica, who was practically bowing as she approached. "Jessica, darling," Mrs. van der Hoven said, her voice loud enough to carry to the cockpit. "There must be a mistake. I specifically requested seat 1A. It has the extra legroom for my corgi." She gestured to a small carrier bag held by her personal assistant, a terrified-looking young woman trailing behind her. Jessica's face paled. "Mrs. van der Hoven, I apologize. The system showed 1A was booked when your assistant called. We have you in 1B, right across the aisle. It's identical." "It is not identical," Mrs. van der Hoven snapped. 1A is on the left. I sleep on my left side. I cannot sleep facing the aisle, Jessica. You know this. I fly this airline 3 times a month." She turned her gaze back to Marcus. She looked him up and down, her nose wrinkling as if she smelled something rotting. "And besides," she said, dropping her voice to a stage whisper that was meant to be heard, "why is that sitting there? Is the staff flying first class now? Or did you let the janitor take a break?" The cabin went silent. A businessman in row 2 lowered his newspaper. Marcus stayed still. He felt the familiar heat of anger rising in his chest, an old friend he had learned to control during boardroom hostilities. He channeled the heat into ice. He slowly turned his head to face her. "I paid for this seat, Ma'am," Marcus said calmly. "Just like you." Mrs. van der Hoven let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Just like me." "Oh, honey, no." She turned to Jessica, snapping her fingers. "Get him up. I want my seat. Now." Jessica looked between the wealthy socialite and the man in the hoodie. It wasn't a hard calculation for her. On one side, a diamond status member who tipped well and complained to corporate. On the other, a random man who looked like he belonged in coach or outside the airport entirely. Jessica straightened her uniform and walked over to Marcus. Her customer service smile was gone. "Sir," Jessica said, her voice hard, "I'm going to have to ask you to move." Marcus looked at her. "Move where? The flight is full." "We have a seat in Economy Plus," Jessica lied. Marcus knew she was lying because he had checked the manifest on his phone 5 minutes ago. The flight was fully booked. "I will issue you a partial refund voucher. But Mrs. van der Hoven is a priority passenger. Her comfort is paramount." "I have a ticket for 1A, Marcus said, holding his ground. "I'm not moving." "Listen." Mrs. van der Hoven stepped closer, invading his personal space. She smelled of overpowering Chanel No. 5 and gin. I don't know what affirmation program got you a discount ticket or whose credit card you stole to buy it, but this is the real world. In the real world, people like me sit here. People like you sit in the back. Now get up before I call security and have you dragged off." Marcus looked deep into her eyes. He saw the absolute certainty of her privilege. She truly believed she could move him like furniture. "Are you threatening me?" Marcus asked softly. "I'm educating you," Mrs. van der Hoven spat. She looked at Jessica. "Well, are you going to do your job, or do I need to call your manager?" Jessica panicked. She signaled to Brad. "Sir, grab your bag. You're causing a disturbance. We cannot depart with a hostile passenger on board." "Hostile?" Marcus chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't moved. She is the one shouting." "Your refusal to comply is an act of aggression," Brad said, stepping up. Brad was large, ex-military maybe, with a jaw that jutted out. He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. A heavy hand. That was the mistake. Marcus glanced at the hand on his shoulder. "Take your hand off me." "Stand up," Brad commanded, squeezing harder. "Now." Strike two. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to choke on. The other first-class passengers were watching with a mix of horror and fascination. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, but nobody spoke up. Nobody wanted to cross Eleanor van der Hoven. Marcus stood up. He was taller than Brad expected, 6'3" of lean muscle. When he rose, he loomed over the flight attendant. Brad took a half-step back, his hand falling away. "Finally," Mrs. van der Hoven huffed, adjusting her fur coat. "Wipe down the seat, Jessica. God knows what he has." Marcus stepped into the aisle, but he didn't move toward economy. He stood his ground, blocking the path. "I want to speak to the captain," Marcus said. "The captain is busy prepping for takeoff," Jessica snapped, trying to herd him backward. "You will take your seat in 24B, or you will be escorted off the plane by federal marshals. Those are your options." "I don't think you understand," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously smooth. "I am giving you a chance, Jessica. I am giving all of you a chance to rectify this. Check the manifest again. Look at the name. Really look at it." "I don't care if your name is Barack Obama," Mrs. van der Hoven shouted, slamming her hand on the overhead bin. "This is my airline. I have been flying with the Vance family for 20 years. I know the CEO, Jonathan Vance, personally. We had dinner in the Hamptons last summer. Do you want me to call him? Do you want me to call Jonathan and tell him a thug is harassing me in his cabin?" Marcus's lip twitched, a micro-expression of amusement. Jonathan Vance, the former CEO, the man who had sold the company because he was drowning in gambling debts, the man Marcus had signed the papers with 5 hours ago. "Call him," Marcus challenged. "Go ahead. Call Jonathan." Mrs. van der Hoven pulled out her gold-plated iPhone. "Oh, you are going to regret this. You are going to rot in a cell." She dialed furiously, putting the phone to her ear. "He won't pick up," Marcus said. She ignored him. "Voicemail," she screamed. She looked at Jessica. "Get the captain. Tell him I am being held hostage by a maniac." Jessica ran to the cockpit door and banged on it. A moment later, the door opened. Captain James Miller stepped out. He was a veteran pilot, grey-haired, with a look of exhausted annoyance. "What is going on out here?" Captain Miller demanded. "We missed our slot. Tower is asking why we aren't moving." "Captain!" Mrs. van der Hoven cried, playing the victim instantly. She pointed a manicured finger at Marcus. "This man refuses to move from my seat. He's threatening me. He's threatening the crew." Captain Miller turned to Marcus. He saw the hoodie. He saw the dreadlocks. He made the same calculation everyone else had. "Sir," the captain said, his voice stern, "I don't know how you got up here, but on my plane, the crew's word is law. If they say move, you move." "Captain Miller," Marcus said, reading the name tag, "I am asking you to follow protocol. Ask the passenger for her boarding pass. Ask me for mine. Whoever has 1A sits in 1A. "I don't have time for a debate," Captain Miller barked. "Brad, get security on the line. Have them meet us at the gate. We're removing this passenger." "You're making a mistake, Captain," Marcus said. "A career-ending mistake." "Are you threatening me, son?" The captain stepped closer, chest puffed out. "I've been flying for 30 years. I don't take orders from street trash." The slur hung in the air. The mask was off. It wasn't about the seat anymore. It was about power. Mrs. van der Hoven smirked. "Street trash, exactly. Get him off." Brad grabbed Marcus's arm again, this time with aggressive force, trying to wrench him toward the door. Marcus didn't fight back physically. He knew the cameras were rolling. He could see the businessman in row 2 recording on his phone. Good. He needed the evidence. "Okay," Marcus said, shaking Brad off with a sharp jerk of his arm. "I'll get off, but I'm taking my luggage, and I'm making a phone call." "Make your call from the holding cell," Jessica sneered. Marcus reached into his pocket, but he didn't pull out a phone to call a lawyer. He pulled out a sleek, black satellite phone, the kind used for secure, high-level corporate communications. He dialed a single number. The cabin went quiet as he held the phone to his ear. Mrs. van der Hoven rolled her eyes. "Who are you calling? Your bail bondsman?" "No," Marcus said into the phone, his eyes locked on Captain Miller. "This is Marcus Thorne. Authorization code Delta Sigma 91. Execute Order 66 on Flight AV402. He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "Yes. Immediate grounding. Cancel the flight plan, and patch me through to the JFK Tower supervisor." Captain Miller froze. He knew what that code meant. It was an override code, a code that only the highest level of executive management possessed. Who are you?" the captain stammered. Marcus lowered the phone. He smiled, but it was a smile that promised winter. "I'm the man who just cancelled your takeoff." The silence that followed Marcus's declaration was broken only by the hum of the auxiliary power unit. But then, a moment later, even that changed. The high-pitched whine of the jet engines, which had been spooling up for taxiing, suddenly began to drop in pitch. The lights in the cabin flickered once, then stabilized as the main power cut, and the aircraft switched fully to battery reserves. The plane, effectively, went dead. "What did you do?" Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I told you," Marcus said, sliding his satellite phone back into his pocket. "I grounded the plane." Mrs. van der Hoven let out a shriek. "He's a terrorist! He's hijacked the plane with a cyber attack! Arrest him! Beat him down!" She scrambled backward, knocking over her poor assistant, clutching her pearls as if Marcus were about to detonate a vest. "Calm down, Eleanor," Marcus said, using her first name with a familiarity that made her flinch. "I haven't hacked anything. I simply utilized the owner's override protocol. It's a safety feature designed to stop a rogue pilot, or in this case, A rogue crew. Captain Miller's face had turned a shade of ashen grey, usually reserved for corpses. The radio on his shoulder, the one connected to ground control, crackled to life. The volume was high enough for the first few rows to hear. Flight AV-402, this is JFK Tower. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to taxi. We have received a code red stop order from Aerovance Corporate HQ. Law enforcement is en route to the gate. Please confirm you have the CEO on board. Over. The captain's hand shook as he brought the radio to his mouth. Tower, this is Miller. We have a passenger claiming to be the CEO. He's a black male, mid-30s, wearing a hoodie. There was a pause on the radio, a long, agonizing, static hiss. Then the tower supervisor's voice came back, dripping with icy seriousness. Captain Miller, be advised, the individual in seat 1A is Mr. Marcus Thorne. He acquired Aerovance Elite at 0800 hours this morning. He is your employer, and he has just flagged your flight for a Level 5 gross misconduct review. Good luck, Captain. Tower out. The click of the radio cutting off sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. Jessica dropped her clipboard. It clattered loudly on the floor. Brad, the muscle who had just been manhandling Marcus, slowly took a step back, his hands retreating to his sides as if they were burning. Marcus didn't move. He didn't gloat. He simply sat back down in seat 1A, the seat he had paid for, the seat he owned, and crossed his legs. Now, Marcus said, his voice echoing in the terrified silence. We have about 10 minutes before the airport police arrive. I think we should use this time for a performance review. Don't you? Mrs. van der Hoven was the only one who hadn't processed the reality yet. Her worldview was too rigid to accept that the man in the hoodie was more powerful than her. "This is a prank," she yelled, though her voice wavered. "It's a sick joke. Jonathan Vance is the CEO. I know him. This thug probably bribed the tower controller. Do you know who I am? I am Eleanor van der Hoven." Marcus looked at her with pity. "Eleanor, Jonathan sold the company because he lost $40 million betting on futures in Hong Kong. He's currently on a flight to the Cayman Islands to hide from the IRS. He didn't tell you? I guess you weren't that close." He pulled out his smartphone, his regular one this time, and tapped the screen. The large LCD monitor at the front of the cabin, usually reserved for the flight safety video, flickered to life. "Since you like screens," Marcus said, "let's look at the data." On the screen, a live feed of the Aerovance HR database appeared. "Part of my due diligence when buying this airline," Marcus explained, addressing the frozen crew, "was analyzing the staff culture. I noticed a lot of complaints about this specific route. Complaints about rudeness, racial profiling, arbitrary seat changes." He looked at Jessica. "Jessica, you have 12 complaints in the last year alone, all from minority passengers. Management swept them under the rug." He looked at Brad. "Brad, 3 incidents of physical intimidation. No consequences." He looked at the captain. "And you, James. You signed off on all of it. You enabled a culture of bullying because it was easier than managing your crew. The air in the cabin was freezing, not because the AC was off, but because the blood had run cold in the veins of 3 people who just realized their lives were over. "Please," Jessica whispered. Tears were welling up in her eyes now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading terror. "Mr. Thorne, sir, I didn't know. If I had known it was you." "Stop," Marcus said. He held up a hand. "That is the worst thing you could have said." He stood up again, walking slowly toward her. The passengers watched, mesmerized. The businessman in row 2 was still recording, but now he was grinning. "If you had known it was me," Marcus repeated softly. "That's the problem, Jessica. You treated me like trash because you thought I was nobody. You thought I was weak. You thought I couldn't fight back." He turned to look at the whole cabin. "Character isn't how you treat the CEO," Marcus said, his voice booming. "It's how you treat the janitor. It's how you treat the man in the hoodie. You failed the test. You failed it so badly that you have become a liability to my brand within 20 minutes of me stepping on board." He turned to Brad. The big man was sweating profusely. "Brad, you put your hands on me," Marcus said. "Do you know what the legal definition of unwanted physical contact is? It's battery. And since we are on an aircraft, it's a federal offense. I don't need to fire you. The FBI will handle you." Brad's knees buckled. He actually grabbed the back of a seat to stay upright. "Sir, I was just following the captain's orders." "Ah, the Nuremberg defense," Marcus said dryly. "I was just following orders." He turned to Captain Miller. The pilot was leaning against the cockpit door, looking like he was having a heart event. "Captain," Marcus said, "you have a pension, don't you? 30 years of service." Miller nodded frantically, unable to speak. "It would be a shame," Marcus mused, looking at the screen where the HR files were still displayed, "if you were terminated for gross negligence and endangering the safety of a passenger. Under your contract, Section 4, Paragraph 2, that voids your pension package completely." Miller gasped. "Mr. Thorne, please. I have a wife. I have a mortgage. I'm 2 years from retirement." "You should have thought about your mortgage when you called me street trash," Marcus said coldly. "You judged me based on my appearance. Now I'm judging you based on your actions, and your actions say you are unfit to command a tricycle, let alone a Gulf Stream." Suddenly, Mrs. van der Hoven stepped forward. She realized the tide had turned, and she tried to pivot. She forced a laugh, a horrible, brittle sound. "Well," she clapped her hands together, "Mr. Thorne, what a dramatic entrance. I must say, you certainly know how to make a point." She adjusted her fur coat, trying to look regal. "I suppose mistakes were made on both sides. But we are both people of status, you and I. I'm sure we can put this behind us. I'm willing to forgive the interruption if we can just get this plane in the air. I have a gala to attend in London." Marcus looked at her. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. "Mistakes on both sides?" Marcus asked. "Well, yes," Eleanor said, smiling nervously. "You were dressed rather poorly. You can't blame them for being confused. It's a misunderstanding. Now, if you'll just have the stewardess bring me a gin and tonic, we can forget this happened." Marcus stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he laughed. It was a terrifying sound. "Eleanor," he said, "you seem to be under the impression that you are still a customer here." "Excuse me?" she bristled. "You aren't a customer," Marcus said. "You are a trespasser." The silence inside the cabin of flight AV-402 was no longer the silence of luxury. It was the suffocating silence of a courtroom before a verdict. Outside, the tarmac had become a theater of flashing lights. The blue and red strobes of 3 Port Authority police cruisers bounced off the wet fuselage, cutting through the darkened cabin windows like strobe lights in a nightmare. The rain hammered against the roof, a relentless drum roll, anticipating the violence of the fall. Inside, Marcus Thorne stood in the center of the aisle. He didn't look like a trespasser anymore. Despite the hoodie, despite the denim, he looked like a judge. He held his smartphone up, the screen glowing bright in the dim cabin. He had connected it to the main cabin speakers via Bluetooth, a feature usually reserved for the purser. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice calm, amplified through the overhead speakers so every passenger in every row could hear. "Are you seeing the live feed?" On the large bulkhead screen at the front of the cabin, the video call maximized. A woman sat in a glass-walled office in Manhattan, framed by the night skyline. She was sharp, terrifyingly professional, and wore the expression of someone who was about to dismantle a bomb or a person. This was Sarah Jenkins, Chief Legal Counsel for Thorne Dynamics. "I have the feed recorded, Mr. Thorne." Sarah's voice boomed through the cabin, crisp and devoid of empathy. "I also have the audio logs from the cockpit voice recorder, which you authorized us to access remotely. I have heard the racial slurs. I have heard the threats. And I have witnessed the assault." Jessica, the flight attendant who had started it all, was trembling so violently that her teeth were audible, clicking together. She looked at the screen, then at the police officers boarding the jet bridge, then back at Marcus. "Mr. Thorne," Jessica whimpered, her hands clasped in a prayer position. "Please. I have a daughter. She's in private school. I need this job. I was just stressed. It was a mistake." Marcus turned to her. He didn't shout. He stepped into her personal space, the same way she had stepped into his. "Stress," Marcus repeated, tasting the word. "You think stress is an excuse for degradation? You looked at me and decided I was unworthy of respect because of my clothes and my skin. You didn't just make a mistake, Jessica. You made a choice. You chose to humiliate a paying customer to please a bully." He looked at the screen. "Sarah." "Jessica Davis," Sarah read from a document on her desk, her eyes scanning the text. "Per Article 14, Section 2 of your employment contract. Any employee found engaging in discriminatory behavior or harassment of a client is subject to immediate termination without notice. Furthermore, because your actions have caused significant reputational damage to the Aerovance brand, which is already trending negatively on social media thanks to the live stream from Seat 2C, we are invoking the gross misconduct clause." Jessica gasped. What does that mean?" "It means," Sarah continued, her voice like ice, "that you are fired effective immediately. Your accrued vacation pay is forfeited to cover legal fees. You are stripped of your flight benefits. And most importantly, Aerovance is filing a formal report with the International Air Transport Association, placing you on the Do Not Hire list for high-risk personnel. You will never work for a major airline again. Not here, not in Europe, not in Asia." Jessica's knees gave out. She collapsed into the jump seat near the door, sobbing into her hands. It wasn't just a firing, it was an execution of her career. Marcus turned his gaze to Brad. The large steward, who had gripped Marcus's shoulder with such arrogance only minutes ago, was now backing away, his face pale and sweaty. "And the tough guy," Marcus said softly. "Brad, was it?" "I didn't hurt you," Brad stammered, holding his hands up. I was escorting you. It's standard protocol for unruly passengers." "I wasn't unruly," Marcus corrected. I was sitting. You put your hands on me to intimidate me. You used physical force to enforce an illegal order." Marcus nodded to the screen. "Bradley Cooper," Sarah said, flipping a page. "We are not just terminating your employment. Thorn Dynamics is filing a civil suit against you personally for battery and emotional distress. We are seeking damages in the amount of $250,000. "I don't have that kind of money," Brad shouted, his voice cracking. "You can't do that." "We know you don't have it," Marcus said, cutting in, "which means we will garnish your wages from whatever job you manage to get next. Every paycheck you earn for the next 10 years. A piece of it belongs to me. You wanted to put your hands on me? Now I have my hands in your pocket. Forever." Brad looked like he was going to be sick. He slumped against the galley wall, defeated. Finally, Marcus turned to the cockpit door. Captain James Miller stood there. He looked small. The authority of the uniform had evaporated, leaving just a tired, scared old man. "Captain," Marcus said, "the man in charge, the man who is supposed to be the final line of defense for justice on this vessel." "Mr. Thorne," Miller said, his voice shaking, "I am 2 years from retirement. I have 30 years of unblemished service. Please, let me resign. Let me retire quietly. Don't take it all away." Marcus looked at him with genuine disappointment. "If you had resigned when Mrs. van der Hoeven told you to kick me off, you would have been a hero. But you didn't. You sided with the money. You sided with the fur coat." "Captain James Miller," Sarah announced, delivering the final blow. "You are terminated for cause, endangering the safety of the aircraft and its passengers by engaging in conflict during active taxiing. Under the terms of the Aerovance Senior Pilot Pension Fund, termination for gross negligence voids all company-matched contributions." Miller's eyes went wide. "My pension? That's over $1 million. "It's gone, Captain," Sarah said. "The company is clawing it back to pay for the operational costs of this grounded flight and the refunding of all passengers. You are leaving with nothing but your 401k contribution, which, looking at the market today, isn't much." "Surrender your insignia," Marcus commanded. With trembling fingers, Captain Miller unpinned the gold wings from his chest. He placed them in Marcus's outstretched hand. "Get off my plane," Marcus said. The 3 of them, Jessica, weeping, Brad, shell-shocked, and Miller, broken, gathered their bags. 2 Port Authority officers stepped onto the plane. They didn't arrest them yet, but they escorted them off. The walk down the aisle was brutal. The passengers, who had been silent witnesses to the abuse earlier, now acted as the jury. "Good riddance," a woman in row 4 shouted. "Shame on you," a man in row 8 yelled. As they stepped off the jet bridge into the rain, the cabin felt lighter. The air felt cleaner. But there was one person left. Eleanor van der Hoeven stood by her seat in 1B. She hadn't moved. She was clutching her Louis Vuitton dog carrier like a shield. She watched the crew leave, her face a mask of disbelief. She couldn't process that the system that had always protected her, had just devoured its own enforcers. When Marcus turned to her, she straightened her spine. She adjusted her white fur coat. She put her sunglasses back on, even though it was dark. "Well," Eleanor said, her voice shrill but trying to sound bored. "That was quite a show, Marcus. Very theatrical. I suppose you think you've made your point." "I have," Marcus said. "Good," she sniffed. "Now, obviously, I cannot fly with this airline anymore. The service is appalling. I will be taking my business to British Airways. I expect my refund processed immediately, and I want a car arranged to take me to Titterborough. I'll charter a private jet. Clearly commercial flying has become too urban for my tastes. She tried to step past him. Marcus stepped sideways, blocking the aisle. You aren't going to Titterborough, Eleanor, Marcus said. Excuse me? She glared at him over her sunglasses. Get out of my way. You fired your staff. You can't fire a customer. I can ban a customer, Marcus said. But that's the least of your problems. He tapped his phone screen again. The large monitor changed. The legal documents vanished, replaced by a web browser showing a financial news ticker and a copy of a legal trust document. You said something earlier, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a conversational, dangerous volume. You said, I know Jonathan Vance. You said you were people of status. I am, she snapped. I am a Vanderhoven. My name is on libraries. Your husband's name is on libraries, Marcus corrected. Your name is on the credit card bills. He pointed to the screen. Sarah, are you still there? I am, Mr. Thorne, the lawyer replied. And I have Mr. Arthur Penhaligon on the line as well. He is the executor of the Vanderhoven Family Trust. Eleanor froze. The colour drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. Arthur? Why? Why are you talking to Arthur? Mrs. Vanderhoven. A new voice came over the speakers, an elderly, stern male voice. This is Arthur. I have been watching the live stream of this incident. It was sent to me by 3 separate board members in the last 10 minutes. Arthur, listen, it's a misunderstanding, Eleanor shrieked, panic finally cracking her facade. This man provoked me. He's a thug. He attacked the crew. The video shows otherwise, Eleanor, Arthur said heavily. The video shows you abusing staff, shouting racial slurs and attempting to commandeer an aircraft. It is a spectacle, a disgusting spectacle. So what? She screamed. I'm rich. I can do what I want. That's where you're wrong, Marcus interrupted. He gestured to the highlighted text on the screen behind him. Clause 7b of your late husband's trust, Marcus read aloud. The beneficiary, that's you, Eleanor, shall receive a monthly stipend and housing allowance solely on the condition that they maintain the moral standing and reputation of the Vanderhoven family. Any public act of scandal, criminal behavior, or gross moral turpitude shall result in the immediate and permanent dissolution of all financial support. Eleanor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The board has convened, Eleanor, Arthur said. We have invoked Clause 7b. As of 5 minutes ago, your credit cards have been cancelled. Your access to the accounts is revoked. The trust is reclaiming the penthouse on Park Avenue. We will be changing the locks by morning. You can't leave me with nothing, Eleanor wailed, the sound piercing the cabin. I have nothing else. I have no money of my own. You should have thought about that before you tried to treat a human being like luggage, Marcus said cold-bloodedly. You wanted to play the "do you know who I am" game? Well, now we know. You're nobody. Marcus looked toward the door. Officers. 2 Port Authority police officers walked down the aisle. They weren't smiling. Mrs. Vanderhoven, the lead officer said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. We have a complaint signed by Mr. Thorne for disorderly conduct, harassment, and interference with a flight crew. We also have a request from the Airport Authority to remove you for trespassing. Don't touch me, she screamed, swinging her handbag at the cop. "I am a VIP. I am a Diamond member." The officer easily caught her arm, spun her around, and clicked the handcuffs onto her wrists. The metallic snick-snick sound was the most satisfying noise the passengers had heard all day. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, "and I suggest you use it, ma'am, because you're making it worse." Eleanor van der Hoven was dragged down the aisle. She wasn't walking like a queen anymore. She was kicking and screaming, her fur coat bunching up around her handcuffed wrists. As she passed Marcus, she looked at him with pure hatred. "You ruined my life," she spat. Marcus looked her dead in the eye. "No, Eleanor, you ruined it yourself. I just signed the paperwork." The officers hauled her off the plane. The sound of her screaming regarding her lawyers faded as she was pushed into the jet bridge. The cabin fell silent again. Marcus stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. He adjusted his hoodie. He looked around at the passengers. 50 faces were staring back at him. Some were filming. Some were shocked. But as the reality of what just happened settled in, the bully was gone. The tyrant was toppled. The atmosphere shifted. The businessman in row 2 stood up and started clapping. Then the woman in row 4. Then the couple in 1B. Within seconds, the entire plane was erupting in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of approval. Marcus raised a hand, smiling for the first time. "Folks, I'm sorry for the delay," he announced, his voice warm and charismatic. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I own this airline, and I promise you, the flight home is on me. Full refunds for everyone. And while we wait for the replacement crew." He walked over to the galley, opened the beverage cart, and pulled out a bottle of Dom Perignon. "I think the bar is open." 6 months later. The winter wind whipped around the glass spire of the Thorne Dynamics Tower in Manhattan, 50 stories above the frozen streets. Inside the penthouse office, the air was warm and scented with cedar wood. Marcus Thorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city that now recognized him as one of its kings. He took a sip of espresso, the porcelain cup-light in his hand. He wasn't wearing the hoodie today. He was dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford suit, the fabric dark and sharp. But the hoodie was still there. It hung in a glass display case on the wall, framed like a retired jersey of a star athlete. It was a reminder. On his massive mahogany desk, a single file folder lay open. It wasn't a business report. It was a dossier from a private intelligence firm Marcus kept on retainer. The cover simply read, "Project Icarus, Status Update." Marcus walked over to the desk. He didn't obsess over these people. He wasn't petty, but he was thorough. When you dismantle an engine, you have to make sure the parts don't try to reassemble themselves. He sat down and flipped the file open. Subject 1. The fallen captain. The first photo was grainy, taken through a rain-streaked windshield. It showed a man sitting in the driver's seat of a dented Toyota Camry, parked outside a rowdy nightclub in Queens at 3 a.m. James Miller looked 20 years older than he had 6 months ago. The sharp, authoritative pilot was gone. In his place was a man with grey stubble, bloodshot eyes, and a stained windbreaker. The report detailed the collapse. The FAA investigation, fueled by the cockpit voice recordings Marcus had released, was swift and merciless. They didn't just revoke his license, they blacklisted him. The gross negligence ruling meant his $1.2 million pension was legally voided by the airline's insurance carrier. But the personal toll was worse. The dossier noted that Miller's wife had filed for divorce 3 weeks after the incident. She took the house in Long Island. She took the dog. Miller was currently living in a studio apartment above a laundromat, driving for a ride-share app to pay for court fees. Marcus read a transcript of a passenger review for Miller's ride-share profile. Driver was depressing, kept talking about how he used to fly jets, smelled like old coffee. 1 star. Marcus turned the page. Subject 2. The blacklisted enforcers, Jessica Davis and Bradley Cooper. The dynamic duo of discrimination. Jessica's section contained a screenshot of a rejection email from a budget motel chain. Dear Ms. Davis, due to the flagged content in your background check regarding the viral Aerovance incident, we cannot offer you the front desk position. The internet never forgets. Whenever a potential employer Googled Jessica Davis, the first result wasn't her LinkedIn profile. It was the video of her sneering at Marcus. It was the memes. It was the articles titled, "The Face of Karen Air." She was currently working under the table as a dishwasher at a diner in New Jersey, earning less than minimum wage because she had no other leverage. The report mentioned she had been forced to pull her daughter out of private school. The humiliation was total. Then there was Brad. The report on Bradley Cooper was perhaps the most satisfying. The assault charge had stuck. He was a convicted felon now, but Marcus hadn't just wanted him in jail, he wanted him to pay. The civil suit for battery and emotional distress had resulted in a judgment of $250,000 against Brad. Since Brad couldn't pay, the court ordered a wage garnishment. The photo showed Brad in an orange safety vest, tossing heavy trash bags into the back of a sanitation truck in the freezing pre-dawn gloom. He looked exhausted, his massive frame hunched over. The financial note at the bottom was the kicker. Subject is earning 18-hour. 25% of every paycheck is automatically deducted and transferred to the Thorn Charitable Trust. Brad was waking up at 4 a.m. every day, freezing in the garbage juice and snow, essentially working to donate money to a charity in Marcus's name. Every bag he threw was a tribute to the man he had tried to manhandle. Marcus allowed himself a small, cold smile. Strike 2. Subject 3. The Queen in Exile. Marcus flipped to the final section. This was the thickest part of the file. Eleanor van der Hoven, the woman who believed her name was a shield strong enough to deflect reality. She had learned, painfully, that a name is only as good as the money backing it. The report painted a picture of absolute social disintegration. The reputation clause in her husband's trust fund was ironclad. The board of trustees, terrified of being associated with a racist viral villain, had cut her off completely. They sued her for breach of contract and won back the apartment, the car, and the allowance. But the society shunning was the most brutal part. The friends she had bragged about, the people she drank gin with in the Hamptons, had ghosted her instantly. She was toxic. The photo in the file was shocking. It was taken inside a cash for gold pawn shop in a rundown strip mall in Yonkers. Eleanor stood at the counter. The white fur coat was gone, replaced by a cheap, lumpy puffer jacket that looked 2 sizes too big. Her hair, once a chemically perfected helmet of blonde, was limp and showing inches of grey roots. She wasn't wearing makeup. The skin under her eyes was dark and sagging. She was holding out a ring, her wedding ring. The transcript of the interaction, recorded by the investigator, was attached. Eleanor. This is a Van Cleef and Arpels. It was insured for $50,000. Pawnbroker. I don't care about the brand, lady. I care about the weight. Gold is down. I'll give you $800. Eleanor. 800? That won't even cover my rent. Do you know who I am? Pawnbroker. Yeah, I know. You're the lady from the YouTube video. The one who got kicked off the plane. 800. Take it or leave it. The report noted that she took the money. She was currently renting a single room in a shared house with 4 other people, waiting tables at a roadside diner where truckers frequently yelled at her for slow service. She had become the help she so despised. Marcus closed the file. He stood up and walked back to the window. The city lights were twinkling below, a sprawling grid of ambition and consequence. He thought about the moment on the plane. He thought about the look in Eleanor's eyes when she realized he had the power. It wasn't just about money. It was about the revelation that her entire worldview was a lie. She thought the world was built for her. She didn't realize that the world only tolerates tyrants until the moment it decides to eat them. He had given them a chance. He had given them multiple chances. He had sat there, patient, calm, offering them an out. Check the ticket. Look at the name. Treat me like a human. They had refused. And so, the universe had balanced the scales. The intercom on his desk buzzed. Mr. Thorne? His assistant's voice chirped. The board of directors is ready for you in the conference room. They want to discuss the rebranding of Aerovance. Marcus pressed the button. I'm on my way. He buttoned his suit jacket. He walked past the display case with the grey hoodie. He paused for a second, catching his reflection in the glass. He didn't see a victim. He didn't see an avenger. He saw a teacher. He had taught them a lesson they would study for the rest of their miserable lives. Marcus turned off the lights in his office, leaving the file on his desk in the dark, and walked out to run his empire. They looked at a hoodie and saw a thug. They didn't realize they were staring into the eyes of the man who signed their paychecks. Marcus Thorne didn't just buy an airline that day. He bought a front-row seat to the most satisfying karma show on earth. The captain is driving a taxi, the bully is hauling trash, and the Queen of Park Avenue is pawning her rings to pay rent. They learned the hard way that true class isn't about where you sit on a plane. It's about how you treat the people standing in the aisle. When you try to crush someone you think is below you, make sure you check who they are first, because they might just own the ground you're standing on. If this story of ice-cold billionaire revenge satisfied your soul, smash that like button right now. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that humble is the new rich. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because in our next story, a rude waiter refuses to serve a homeless man, unaware that he's actually the landlord of the restaurant. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.